Meeting to order for the City of San Juan Commission today, April the 20th, 2015, at 6:04. If we can rise for an invocation, and I'd like to call upon Pastor Rodriguez, would you do us the favor of leading us in an invocation?
Father, we praise you and we give you glory and honor, and thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to gather and to be able to participate of our democracy, Father. Lord, I pray that this day you will help this commission, Lord, to gather the adequate information to arrive to the best decision, Lord, for the city. We thank you, Lord, and we bless your name. Amen.
Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You all may be seated. Under item A, presentation by city staff to verify, assess, ascertain the interest and sinking fund contains a sufficient balance to validate and fund the draws in the finance plan proposed by First Southwest at the April 14, 2015 meeting and any other amounts required for current debt service.
Mayor Commission, this is, in your packet, there should be a memorandum issued by our interim finance director, Mr. Libor Gonzalez, and it delineates all the tasks that we were asked to do and get the projected numbers of revenues and expenditures. And that memo, we have assessed and ascertained and validated the debt service fund ending 9/30/2014, and also the fund that's going to be projected revenues and expenditures for ending 2015. As you can see in the revenues and the expenditures and the total revenue and expenditures, the numbers before you, as well as the project. Now, on the 428 that you see on top, that is the unaudited number right now that we were able to ascertain due to the fact that the audit report is not going to come out until the first week of May, according to our auditor. That 428, 197.93, that number, we do not project that it's going to go lower than that, but we do project that it might go a little bit slightly over that. On the total projected debt service fund balance for 2014-2015, that would be the 537,461.86. And based on the interest and sinking debt service fund balance that we ascertained through our staff, then has sufficient funds to validate the finance plan proposed by Mr. Chris Vela, and he's in attendance as well. So that is what we were able to ascertain. I do, and second page that you have there, attached to that particular memo, you do have those numbers highlighted in red, and those are the actual revenues up to date, and the numbers highlighted in black for the rest of the year from April to September are the projected ones that our staff was able to ascertain. Do you all have any questions for myself or our county manager?
Questions? Are there any questions? If they're not, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next item. B, evaluation, assessment, and review of proposed projects previously presented by Hidalgo County Commissioner Precinct 2 and the City Commissioners.
This item also, I know that Precinct 2 Commissioner did mention the fact that there was discussion on option A on some of the projects on Sioux Road and Endora. And also in your packet, you do have some copies of option A, B, and C, and so that was provided to you all for discussion.
Is there any discussion on that item?
Go ahead.
On that overlay, chief, was that 2-inch, was it a 2-inch overlay, or do you know? I don't remember.
I think it was, I think that's what he was saying.
Was it, was it, Ron?
Number C, or?
Yeah, the option,
It's,
option
what
C.
they were gonna do is break it up, they were gonna put, I think he's gonna put a geogrid. I don't see a geogrid.
On option C,
Yeah, was it a 2-inch?
it was just, nope, it was just gonna be,
Oh, it was, okay.
Set back the base, put, tack coat, and then, 2-inch Hutman.
Oh, they're two different ones.
but yeah, I think that's something that, on San Antonio, I know that, Commissioner has mentioned on 2 occasions now that he's willing to participate in the construction of that, in which I think that that's something that we need to discuss. You know, to what level he's willing to participate, or to what dollar amount he's willing to participate, so as to bring that cost down for that particular project.
I updated San Antonio, a little bit more detail, you know, one of the copies. Cost estimate, and then there's a map. There's 10,
Did the cost estimate change at all?
One, each one is separate,
they're all the same,
I'll see.
one for. It changed to 919, instead of 800, I think that was originally proposed. I think some of the, I went out there, and the thing is that, you know, we always said from Ridge to Moore, but from Moore to the cemetery road is probably out of the whole street, that's the worst part. So that has to be reworked or something, or you just can't end it at Moore. I think it needs to go at least to the cemetery street or to the canal that's there. That's real bad, that little section there, probably worse than the rest of the street. If you're gonna do that, you gotta go to that, at least overlay. Something like that. There will need to be some right-of-way, taken, which is that vacant land that's there in the corner. And, I know Javier knows the owner of the land. We will need at least 20 feet of right-of-way, and I did put some money in there just in case, on the cost estimate. Not a lot, I think, put, 20,000 for the right-of-way acquisition, or 2,000 feet. Now, there's some homes in
Now, that's just for the acquisition. Do you think that covers the entire cost of acquisition, Ron?
I think it's only one parcel. I think so. There's 3 homes, I mean, 5 lots with houses a little bit further south. And there is some kind of dedication, we didn't get to review it. If you go out there, you see where the poles have been relocated and where the residents have their fences, which is way back there. Something has happened there. It's not a subdivision, but I think there has been some kind of probably a voluntary annexation or something happened years ago, or there's an easement with the power company, but everything is moved over. Or when you all did a sewer line project with the Colonias, probably maybe 10, 15 years ago, you all might have got an easement on there. So I think that's gonna be okay, those houses that are there. Other than that, I think the right over there. And what we did, we matched where there's a section that's already done, which is over there by Paloma Blanca Estate. It's already, curb and gutter on both sides, So we went and looked at it, we can keep it, there's also sidewalk on both sides in that little area. And just to rework the pavement and keep that width, which was at 42 feet back to back. So that's what we estimated to do all the way to Ridge, 42 feet. North of there, by the park, for some reason, it's 41 feet back to back. So that's what this estimate is.
These are our numbers, right, Ronnie? So would they differ with whatever you all have?
I mean, it would differ on a couple of things. Number one, if we were to partner with the county, I think that right-of-way costs might be a little lower. And then additionally, of course, whatever investment the county would put in as well.
I think, you know, but we can't speak for the owner of this parcel, but I would think it would be considerably due to the city, because it's really going to enhance their problem to do this. But that conversation has to be really done. And I think Javier knows the owner, so, yeah.
Ellen, so she's a nice lady, maybe she'll give.
The other question that I had on the drainage for Las Flores, is that gonna help us as far as the police station or substation, once we build?
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, that would, if it wouldn't be this, it would've been a lot cheaper. Because, we had a plan years ago, actually, we had one, we're trying to get it funded through Urban County, I think twice. And, it's probably half of that. But that's just taking care of the crossing there at the canal at Dominique Park and trying to relieve the drainage from that area. Now, if we're gonna do this thing next door, you're gonna have to address the whole, I think it's 40-acre tract, has to be addressed now. So what we're proposing is reversing that flow. I think the map, Javier, you have there, reversing the flow in Las Flores and bringing it along the east side of the property, crossing the canal over there, then going back to Moore Road, to Nebraska. Then go to Moore, because for some reason, just south of Moore Road, on Nebraska, there's a 54-inch pipe. It just starts right there. So we need to get the water to that 54-inch pipe. And this is what we're proposing. See, in other words, so you have an issue here with it. This is Las Flores. We have here, and it goes in between two lots. You cannot work on that. So there's an issue there. So what we propose is we're going to do this, is bring this way. And take it off of that system there and take it all the way to here. This is where the 54-inch starts that way. And take it off all this area here. And when this develops, the same thing. It will not be put on that system. It'll be on this one. Because this is next, I think. And then, of course, you have this big piece here. And that will forever take care of your drainage for all this area.
Chief, how much of that is benefiting the public safety building?
It's right here. We put a manhole there with, of course, we don't know how the layout's gonna be, but it's gonna be there, so it'll take care of all this area. Now, there is a pipe up here, but it's very shallow. It's probably about 3 feet shallow here, so. A quick fix, you could build a police station and put a pond and somehow pump it to that inlet. And it'll take care of the police station, but it's not gonna do anything to Las Flores. That's something that is just a quick fix. I mean, it's not a quick fix, it's just a fix for the police station, nothing else. But it's not a long-term plan. It's something that could be done in the interim, but it does not do anything to Las Flores.
No, but my question is, if that's going to fix it, Chief, how much forfeiture money can we invest in that?
Well, now the forfeiture money is gonna go to actual building, so we're looking at, the numbers that we project out on forfeiture, that would be close to about 1.8.
That we have available?
That we won't have it.
And none of it can defray the cost in that particular work here for the infrastructure?
I mean, I know that the last time we checked is the fact that as long as we don't fund it, all of it, if we can fund some of it, because it is gonna affect, if we build a safety building, a public safety building, it's gonna affect, it has to affect everybody. And I think that it will benefit everybody as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that,
Do you know what percentage can be applied?
we haven't gotten that answer, but the one for sure answer I can give you is the fact that we cannot fund it 100%, but, you know, at the very least, on the prorated that they gave us about 20% from the,
You can fund 20% with forfeiture?
yes. So, we still don't know the exact numbers of it, but we can fund infrastructure, that's, but we don't know exactly how much.
But you estimate that it's somewhere about 20,
Sure,
maybe more.
can be more, yes,
You asking for an opinion?
yes.
And is that 20% of the total cost of the project or 20% of the cost of the public safety building?
20% of the actual infrastructure we gotta do on that, so when we combine it together, it all depends on the actual numbers.
I think what's happening is that, you know, I always, they got this money here, obviously you have to put drainage. You know, and if the drainage costs that much, you could almost justify all of it, because there is no drainage. But, I mean, I'm not speaking for how they have this money, how the federal government, whoever has the money can spend it, but you could almost 80–90% of this project, if because of that building or not, you wouldn't have to do it.
If we were to use a conservative number of 20%, which you think is safe to say, not sure what the extent would be, we would be looking at reducing that by approximately $180,000.
Actually, the number that we have looked at was 300,000.
So
That
let's,
was the original number that we had looked at that infrastructure. But we still, that's something that, hopefully by this week or next week, we should be an answer.
maybe 200,000 on the surface. To reduce that amount to 754,000 approximately. Okay.
And the whole site that's there, those 11 acres, is that what it is, right? 11 acres. I don't know how big, the size of the police station gonna take?
Well,
An
and,
acre?
Yeah, and that's what, we're still gonna be in discussion on the needs assessment.
And of course, the whole layout of the whole 11 acres, eventually you're gonna do other stuff, and more parking you put, more drainage you need. So I think it's gonna take care of the issue, whatever you all decide to do there, and Las Flores.
What I'd like for you to find out, Chief, as you're looking for these numbers and what can be the participation of the forfeiture money, how much time within the time that it gets funded to do the work would you need to start the actual building so that we're also aware if there's any kind of requirements in that area? Thank you.
You have the plan for Las Brechas with you, or no?
Las Brechas is another issue that I need some direction. You know, I do have the master plan, but I left it in the car. I thought there was just gonna be numbers, right? You said we're gonna be showing maps. However, when we did the road crossing, I'm talking about the ditch, the lowering of the ditch and Sergeant Trevino. We put a 48-inch line. It's buried already with inlets. Heading east, it's plugged right now. What the project is for your future, whenever you all do widen or do anything with Sergeant Trevino, which I think will happen once all that land starts developing, you have a drainage. It already has the outfall. So all you have to do is extend it and put inlets to it. On the master drainage plan, we already identified Las Brechas and the other street, which is called Guadalupe, just to the east of Brechas, as flooding areas. And if you, for some reason, these subdivisions drain into a line that's behind their lots. They're between lots of houses in their backyard. And if you go over there right now, if you remember, not that long ago, probably about 6 months ago, Magic Valley had put brand-new poles down the canals. They were putting brand-new lines. That's when they moved, when we widened it, they moved it over. Well, they put a brand-new line right, if you line it up, this drainage line, you see these new poles on that line. I mean, did it hit it? We don't know. We put water, and I think we put a hose, and it's hard to tell if it ever came out of the ditch or not. It probably just drained, it's just how much. That's the reason there's flooding. So that's not an option anymore. That's where we said we gotta reverse that drainage, get it out. It all goes there, but we gotta reverse it back to Sergeant Trevino, and that line is sized for that. So if we do drainage for right now, if we just do the drainage, we'll extend that 48-inch pipe, reverse those things, obviously pave their street, so it'll have to be patched. But Sergeant Trevino has no, just patching, if that's what we're gonna do. It will have to be in the pavement, just drainage. And, you know, so, or you widen the street right now and put curb and gutter correctly. I mean, those are the options. What I have here is just the drainage.
Any other questions?
Going back to Sioux Road, I know you mentioned, Mayor, about going with option, or I don't know if you're going with option A or just sticking with option C. I know that if we go with option A, we're looking close to $1 million again, compared to the 2.3 here. Is that something that, for Sioux Road, we can afford to do on our own? If we drop it from the MPO monies, right? If we drop it and just go with option A, like right now, I know it needs to be done immediately, right? We can't wait. Is it something that we can afford to do now? Or is it something that, it's out of the question?
to borrow money for that, too. Yeah, that's just for Sue and Dora?
Well, Dora, I don't know, I think we haven't really discussed this, I think we're in agreement as far as the 5-lane? No? I know we haven't discussed it, so that's why I figured.
I think that's why we're having the discussion.
How do you feel about that one?
About which one?
About Eldora?
Eldora. What I believe is, if you look at what we're needing to finance, you know, our folks come up with the numbers that it's doable with the proposition that Mr. Vela came up with for funding. And there's a proposal that says that we can fund it all, and of course, some numbers have changed, to the tune of 3 cents increase on taxes. So if we have in existence right now a contract with the county, which we have already performed on, and my question is going to be for council, if we have an agreement with the county already, we performed and we've paid on the 1.3 for the overlay on those roads. And I know that Commissioner came here a couple of times and has stated that he will not put in the $1 million unless we put in drainage. So he's changed the terms of what that was. The contract's very clear, the agreement's very clear, completely delineates what the cost would be to the city for each road for the overlay. What does that do to the spirit of that agreement? Because that was what was going to provide for us an immediate relief for the people, talking about June turnover and an August turnover on those roads.
I don't have the agreement. Let me make sure I don't have the agreement. However, I do know there is a 30-day out contract that both the city and the county agreed that at any time, as long as they provide 30 days notice, you can get out of the contract. So that was part of the consideration. So taking into consideration that you could do, the city could do the 2 parts as indicated, that 30-day window was still allowed in the contract. If I'm not mistaken, let me make sure I don't have a copy of that agreement. Yes,
Been performed and we have paid. We've performed on that contract.
yes.
So
But-
the out, how could not be an option if we've already performed?
But it would be argued that, well,
Who's going to argue it?
it could be argued that could, because that would be taken into consideration. If you put part of it, you know, if you did the two parts, as you're indicating in this situation, and if that out is in there, then the agreement was signed like that, but. You know what, I don't see that out in here. I don't see the 30-day window in here. I don't know why I thought I had seen it in here. This is the current agreement between the city of San Juan and Hidalgo County that was signed October 14th, 2014. And I believe this is the one in place, but. I wouldn't want to talk about the legalities here in front of everyone at this point, but I take that back. I don't see a 30-day out in this contract.
I'd like for you to take a look at that, because that changes really the obligations and, I believe, coming to a look at what that has bound us and has bound the county to, and see how that values as far as requesting us to do an extra, I remember what the commissioner said, 700,000 or another million for the drainage, which is not contemplated or a term within that contract that we have. And I want that answer.
Can we go ahead and talk to the county legal counsel?
Yes.
And I'll also speak to the county commissioner's office as well about it, to make sure that I do have the full contract as well, Mayor. It is numbered, but it doesn't say the total, it just says 5, 6, but it doesn't tell me 6 of 5 is, you know, 6 of 7, it doesn't tell me.
The last page, after you've counted, has my signature?
There is a page, but it has it does have your signature that I have on here. I have page 5 that was signed by the county judge, and that was signed by their counsel, and page 4 was signed by yourself.
After that is the exhibit?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it is. Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Yes. Council doesn't mind, let me go and speak to their attorney and also to the county commissioner's office about that.
Now, as far as the funding, and I'm just going to use the numbers before, because I don't have any other numbers once we look in detail. If the funding is right now being proposed to actually take effect or effectuate with a 3-point-something increase in taxes, how are we doing that without going to the voter? What's the instrument that allows us to do that? Because typically, we're going to raise our taxes, and it's tied to the ad valorem, we would be going to the voter.
And I believe that Mr. Vela is here, but in the discussions we've had, whenever we go out for certificates of obligation and bond counsel, we don't have to go out to the voters.
That's what's
for that.
being proposed, a certificate of obligation.
That's the discussions that I've had with bond counsel and with a financial advisor. I don't know what the commission's proposing, but I mean, that's the only discussion I've had. If we go out for bonds, that would have to be during the May election or the November election. Of course, the May election, we've already missed that deadline. So if you were to go out for bonds, the city, it would have to be in the November election. Yes, that would be.
Fund, when a bond is, or a certificate of obligation is given, and the city would commit, whether it be for, well, whatever amount it's going to be. If it's going to be for an amount that would require us, I see different deadlines of timeframes, talking 2016 and 2017. Now, a city cannot fund or would not be wise, and maybe you need to explain it to me, or maybe Mr. Vela, so I can be clear. If the full amount that was looked at the last meeting, and we're just going to use those numbers, not taking into consideration the differences which have been discussed, and the amount of the debt was that 8.3 million that we're looking at, okay? Now, when we're looking at going out for the certificates of obligation, we as a city would not go out for the full amount. Because I'm not gonna take out a loan that I'm gonna pay 4% on and hold it while I'll put it in the bank for the time it needs to be drawn at, I don't know what interest rates would be on a savings or a money interest-bearing account. I suspect that when you're trying to increase the value of your money in the bank, it's not gonna be as high as the interest you're paying for loaning it. So how do you rectify that? Because I don't see us doing all of that funding up front. Would that be correct? Because I wouldn't do it. You're not gonna fund if you're not gonna use it and be paying interest higher than what you're gaining on the money. So how do you rectify that? Yes, and maybe you could buy the microphone so we can.
I think there were like 3 questions or 4 questions there. Let's start with the timing, first of all, that was proposed in that document. The timing that was proposed was an issuance of debt through certificates of obligation. We did look at the various alternatives that were available to political subdivisions for the issuance of debt, specifically cities, in the presentation titled Municipal Issuance Process. And one of the options is certificates of obligation. Now, in the document that we presented the last time, the timing was, the principal amount, I believe, was to fund 2 projects. The projects that were recently described here of the drainage improvements and some street improvements, there were projects that were brought up by yourself, if I remember correctly, and the other projects that were brought up as a result of the presentations by Precinct 2. We also discussed at that meeting the various alternatives of when they needed the money, if you recall. And it was estimated that the majority of the money, or $4-point-some-odd million, was going to be needed rather quickly in the process. I brought up the issue of having to obligate and spend the money within a 3-year period under federal law, if you recall. And so assuming that we have a issuance of $4.7 million and the total contribution on the city's part for the Precinct 2 program was 5.7, then that's what, the 4.7 was what it required under the initial issuance to get that program going. That's what they need, what I understood that they needed to get going. So that would leave $1 million that you could potentially defer at a later date. Now, when I said the 85%, that's a reasonable expectation of being able to spend that money in a certificate that is signed, you know, when that transaction would be done. Now, the money's needed for compliance with this other program, you know, that's, you know, something, you know, here that you all need to consider. Now, the plan that we came up with assumed, initially, the plan that we came up was delivering the money in the summer of 15, which would put you into a tax rating setting 15, 16. We later found out that they didn't need the money right away, that it could be done closer to the end of the year. So if you look at our presentation and the footnotes that are integral to the presentation, you will see that it has an assumption of an issuance of November of 15. And to smooth out your payment process so that you don't have a big payment at one end that is that you would be subject to, we made a payment in August of interest only. That interest payment was going to be made up of in the summer of 16, August of 16. We would issue the certificates in November with the first payment in August of 16. And that was done with the increased and assessed valuation assumptions that were.
And when you say the first payment on August 26th, payment into the project itself or payment of an actual
Actual debt,
debt?
a debt payment. And that was an interest-only payment. And that was done with that contribution, which is the reason why the validation of the interest in sinking fund was so important, because we had $110,000 assumption into that payment, and the rest of the money was coming from growth in the assessed valuation for fiscal year 15-16. Okay? So that takes you into a payment of August, so in essence, you wouldn't be setting a tax rate until 16-17.
That would be base, so the numbers really wouldn't be the dollar amount, it's the cent amount, because it may be a very different number at that time.
So now let me address the other parts of the question as to, because those are valid points that you bring up, Mayor, and that's called arbitrage. In other words, we have debt at a certain rate, and we have it sitting here, and what is it making in terms of interest rates? Well, you know that short-term interest rates are at an all-time low for a number of reasons. I did forward to you some correspondence to that effect. However, the other side of it is the risk involved with delaying and what may happen to interest rates. And that's a decision that it's hard to gauge, what you do. So the rule of thumb in issuing debt is, when do you need the money? Okay? So with the assumption that the money was needed at the time that it was represented to us that it was needed, we came up with that plan that you had before you the last time. I don't know, Mayor, if I answered all of your questions.
You definitely have answered some of them. I had a question, maybe not directed to you, but to council. What would an instrument look like, unlike the agreement that we have, that would assure that when and if money was funded for any of these projects that we have, no, county, let me just stick to county, that they would be bound to perform within the allotted time, so that this doesn't happen like we're looking at now. We've committed, we've done our part, something happens and it can't start on whatever designated day the amount is to be funded. And, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, the county changes the scope of what it's looking at. And how do we make sure that we're not left holding the bag, that we've gone ahead and taken the loan and they've not performed, or not going to perform within the time that they've indicated, so that we are making sure we're not going to be holding on to debt longer than we should?
First of all, we would use an instrument very similar, would be the interlocal agreement that all counties and cities use together. But as with any contract, we would make sure that we would try to anticipate any of these issues that have come up, any of the experiences that we've had, and put them within the agreement. So the issues you're talking about right now, we would make sure that we would put protections for the city in this interlocal agreement.
I mean,
If that makes sense. Would have to, just like a contract, any contract that you would make with anybody, you have to try to anticipate any issues that pop up, that may pop up in the future, and you put them in that contract. So that's what we would do in this interlocal agreement, that we would create if we were to go forward with this situation. That's what we would look at.
Mayor, if you're talking specifically just about the county projects, and since those county projects are going to require the MPO funding, any contract that you enter into with the MPO to use those fundings goes through TxDOT, in which case the contract would be what's referred to as an AFA, which is an advanced funding agreement. And at that point, the state will dictate when and what the terms are, and that's how that works. And they would be the ones that make the assurances, and they would be the ones that would set the timelines.
AFA?
Yeah, it's called the Advanced Funding Agreement, and that's going to be an agreement between the city, the county, and TxDOT. And TxDOT serving as the agent for the FHWA, the Federal Highway Authority Administration. And so anytime you enter into a project through the MPO, that is the guiding instrument for the project. And so that AFA is going to be an agreement between all the parties to the funding. But that's the document that has to be signed, and that's the document that has to be in place. Council, if you want to talk to the MPO or to TxDOT themselves to get additional information on that.
I can do that, Mayor, to discuss the issues you're bringing up. What if a situation comes up where it's not a viable project anymore? What happens if the city's already invested a certain amount or the county has? What would be the out for the county or the city, whoever the party is at that point?
I'm just worried about the city. That's my concern.
Yes. But we would definitely talk to MPO and the county on that issue.
My question for Mr. Vela and would be if, you know, we showed, or you showed that the, tax rate for the 5.7 would be at 0.01. Would you be able to calculate what amount we could go out for without raising taxes? Is that something you would be able to, at what point it triggered the 1 cent? What point prior to the 5.7 does not trigger a tax, but we would be able to fund with what has been projected and without having to impact our residents?
The number would be based on whatever your assessed valuation growth would be from one year to the other. Pretty much the same formula that you have there in terms of the contribution from the interest in sinking fund. So you would have the two components. We could certainly perform that calculation for you.
I'm interested in that calculation. And then, Chief, if you look at the numbers on this particular one that has the capital improvement program, looking at some of the additions that Mr. Cruz has stated would be increases on San Antonio Road and then decreases on Las Flores. Of course, you have not ascertained how much would be allowable under forfeiture money, because I would not want to borrow more than we're needing. And if there's a way that we could have that amount, so we know exactly how much we need to be funded in that particular, I think that would be very important. I'd like to see that. And then,
Real quick, Mayor, we did request it to fund all of Florida's project.
sure, but you're not sure yet what percentage, is that correct? I'd like to know if you can obtain that information. So those are, any other questions or comments?
Just one more for you, Mayor. As far as Sioux Road and Eldora, so what you're asking is that we stick to the contract or the agreement with Precinct 2 and leave it as,
I think I want to know what we have on that agreement for purposes of performing by June and August, because I think
revisiting it 3 years down the road, or 2, 3 years?
my concern is the immediacy.
Right,
Because
exactly.
that was, when we entered into that contract, we were under the impression that we'd be able to do something immediately.
Right.
And my understanding, and we can go back and review, but the commissioner says he would not 1 million unless we agreed to add the drainage. I don't know exactly what that amount, but it was close to another 700,000 or another million by the city. In addition, well, the 333,000, taking it up to either 700,000 or a million. So that just changes the scope, and I want to find out what we can hold the county to do so that we can at least get that done, and we have time to figure out what exactly is the best approach. Some of you may already figured what you want, but I just think we need to look at all of that information. I want to make sure we do something in June. I don't want that to be held back.
Mayor, I just want to add that on those projects out of the MOU, we already paid 2 projects. Cesar Chavez and Road, so.
I just want to clarify that Commissioner was very clear that the $1 million is there and remains committed. He never at any time said he was decommitting or not committing it.
He said he would not, what he wanted was unless we
If-
did more, he did not want to fund it.
And then he followed up immediately with saying that $1 million is there.
Make sure we can clarify that. I want to make sure.
We can go
I
to the
didn't hear
minutes
that.
on that as well.
I didn't hear that. Any other comments? Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? This meeting is adjourned at 6:50. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.